Communication is an interesting thing because we're always communicating all the time. I think for me, my problem is I feel like my communication is when I'm doing a sermon or when I'm doing a Devo or when I'm sitting down with leaders talking to them about, where God's taking us and what we're doing and, I'm communicating. But we are always communicating, and I've missed that. I've missed the fact that anytime I'm speaking or I'm talking with my wife or with a friend, I'm in communication. And do I have a goal in mind? Do I have an end in mind for my communication? And I don't think that I've personally made a decision to say this is what I want Robbie's type of communication to be. This is what I want the end result to be for my communication. As a pastor and a teacher, my end goal is for people not to just know God's word, but to be about God's word. So that means I need to give them some practicalities to God's word and give them a roadmap to apply the information and what they're learning. Now, mostly I'm a preacher, and Robert Morris talks about being more of a preacher, which I'm transferring a burden. So I'm good at transferring the burden. So I have to work a little bit more on being a teacher and giving them that application and giving them that this is what you can do today to apply what you're learning. And as a communicator, I feel like I need to be more intentional about my communication all around, not just in my sermons, not just in my devos, but in everyday life. Let me give you an example. So as I've been thinking about this, and my teaching philosophy is to not just know about it, but to be about it. So for me, that means I need to work with the end in mind. Where do I want to go in my communication? What do I want people to walk away with in my communication? And so I took this with my daughter. Who do I want her to be? Her name's Rose. She's 1 year old. Who do I want her to be when she gets older? And that changes my communication with her. And it changes my communication with my wife, Rebecca, on how we communicate about Rose and where we go and what we say and how we say it, because we have a roadmap as to how we want her to be. And I think Andy Stanley talks about this. You've got to have a roadmap. You've got to have a destination. And for me, that solidifies that teaching philosophy is if you just don't want them to know about it, you want them to be about it, you've got to know what you want them to be about. So I'm a high school and middle school pastor at my church. And what we do with that, an example for that is I want middle schoolers to know who Jesus is and why he's important. And I want high schoolers to develop a biblical worldview. So what I do is I develop my middle school sermons around Jesus, around his character, who he is. And I put my high school sermons around, politics and, those hard questions that people ask. And I want to develop a systematic biblical worldview. So I develop sermons around that. But mostly I'm transferring a burden. I'm telling them this is what we need to be about. So then I develop a small group curriculum around the Synoptic Gospels for a middle school and a systematic worldview for high schoolers, so that I'm giving them this burden and I'm giving them application and practical advice to know about, to what they need to know. And then in that small group curriculum, they're being challenged to walk out the knowledge that they've received. So it works twofold for me, and my philosophy is we're going to teach and give them a burden, and then we're going to teach and give them application in small groups and give them a challenge. We give them a challenge every week to walk out God's word and what it says. So my teaching philosophy is to not just know about it, but to be about it, because that's what God's word tells us to do. It tells us to make disciples, and that means we're not just giving information, that we're giving them application and practical advice. Can you imagine if we all sat down and we made a roadmap for how we wanted to communicate and what we wanted our end result to be as a communicator with our marriages, with our relationship with God, with our devos for ourselves personally, like where do I want to grow? How do I want to grow? In our sermons, in our small group curriculum, if we develop a roadmap and we just say we have an end in mind, where do we want to take people in our communication will be so much clearer and so much more effective, and we will be making disciples and giving God all the glory along the way.